Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to the Planning Committee being held at 6 p.m. on the 8th of June 2023. Just as a polite reminder, this meeting is being live streamed. So with that, welcome everyone to the Planning Committee for the year 2023-2024. It's good to see you all here, and with that we'll move to open up the agenda. The first item on the agenda is apologies of absence. Do I have apologies of absence, Matthew? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, you do. So Councillor Shinnick has sent her apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Hooper. Councillor Watson has sent her apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Mel Downey. And Councillor Piccolo has sent his apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Tandy.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's everyone covered. So with that, we go on to items of urgent business. Currently, there are no items of urgent business. And now item 4, which is declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest to be declared? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I've skipped minutes there. Item 2, minutes to approve the record from March the 16th and April the 6th, 2023, found on pages 5 to 14. Apologies about that. Okay. Yeah, all those present agrees? Yeah. Agreed. Thank you. All right then, so on with that, we're going to declarations of receipt of any correspondence. I personally have not had anything from this agenda. No emails, no phone calls. I'm not sure if anyone else has received anything. No? Not for this agenda. No? Okay, thank you. All right then, so with that, we go on to planning appeals, found on pages 15 to 28. Lee, did you have any comments, or does anyone have any questions for Lee in relation to the appeals? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Reports for noting, but the team are here, and if there's any questions, we can certainly answer
them. Just looking at the report, Lee, we do seem to have had increasing numbers of appeals, and there was one decision where it was quashed. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Thank you, Chair. That would have been where a notice would have been served and the inspectorate would have found there to be an issue with that notice, so have quashed it, so essentially made it redundant, taken it out of action, wouldn't allow it to go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions there? No, okay. So then that takes us on to item 7, which is a public address to the Planning Committee, which allows us to discuss the items on the agenda here this evening. Just as a polite reminder, item 10, Sounddown Nurseries, has been removed from the agenda at the request of the applicant for more time to address some of the concerns that were raised by the officers. So item 10 is not on the agenda here this evening. And we will start off with item 8, which is 21/01635/FUL, land south of Marsh Farm. Now, this is an item that was previously discussed prior to the elections. So myself, Councillor Polly, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Tandy are live on those, and everyone else, if you could just, won't be involved in this item, but we can bring you straight in to item 9. As soon as that's finished. Thank you. Okay, so with that, let's go to pages 29 to 94. This is land south of Marsh Farm. Lucy, if you'd be so kind as to present your updated report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll go quite quickly through the presentation as you've seen it before. Okay, so the application is for full planning permission for installation of a renewable-led energy generating station and ground-mounted solar farm and associated battery storage, etc. The application is cross-boundary application, although the much larger part with all the solar panels is within Thurrock, with the grid connection mostly within Basildon and culminating within Rochford. By way of updates, the Council has been liaising with the Fire Brigade. They have confirmed that they are happy with the battery storage safety management plan condition, which was already in place, but this has been slightly amended in the wording to confirm that the Fire Brigade will be a consultee, just to kind of doubly make sure of that. Also, conditions 3 and 4 will be slightly amended just to clarify that there's 40 years of energy export which is allowed, and a condition has been added regarding glint and glare management plan. Okay, so this is the site location plan. Site comprises of 10 adjoining arable fields, mainly within fobbing marshes, and is low-lying. The Thurrock site area is 134 hectares, and the access is from Fobbing High Road. Approximately 1.5 kilometres to the south is Corriton Refinery and DP World, and then Thames Estuary. The site comprises of grade 3B land within the agricultural land classification, which is not best and most valuable land. Parts of public footpaths 14 and 199 run through this site. The site is mainly in flood zones 3A, and the site is all within Greenbelt. So this is an aerial photograph, and the site is central. So this is a proposed site layout, so showing where the solar panels are proposed to be. This is the proposed solar panels. So the maximum height of the panels is 3 metres, and they track the path of the sun from east to west. This is the Landscape and Ecology Enhancement Plan. So it shows the landscape and ecology measures which the proposal incorporates. This includes new hedgerows, new woodland, grassland, planting. This alongside buffers for ecological areas. So next on to the photos. This is a map to show the viewpoints. So we've got photos from viewpoint 2, which is down here, viewpoint 3, which is up here, so they're slightly outside the red line of the site, and viewpoint 4, which is along Marsh Lane, just there. So this is from public footpath 199, looking centrally from viewpoint 2. So that is as is now, and then this is with a photo montage of the solar panels, but as we discussed last time, it is in the update report, but just to confirm, this is kind of worst case scenario, so as they would be at the 3 metre height. This is viewpoint 3 from public footpath 14, facing left. So that is, as it is present, you can see DP World Port in the background. And then this would be with the solar panels. This is viewpoint 4, so that's from Marsh Lane, which is accessed from High Road Fobbing. So looking centrally. And this would be the view with the solar panels. Okay, at the site visit, members asked for an additional kind of photo montage viewpoint to be created from within the site, from footpath 14. So this is just showing the yellow arrow is indicating where this new viewpoint is, and then this is the view as it is at present. This is the view as it would be with the solar panels in 1 year, and then this would be in 15 years. Okay. So the site is within Greenbelt and would not fall within one of the exceptions to inappropriate development as set out in the MPPF and local policies. Therefore, it would result in inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which is by definition harmful to openness. The applicant has advanced circumstances that would amount to very special circumstances that overcome the presumption against this type of proposal. There were 12 factors towards very special circumstances put forward, which were assessed from paragraph 6.27 onwards in the original March planning report. So these include renewable energy generation, energy security, the temporary reversible impacts and biodiversity net gain, amongst others. Ooh. The balancing exercise is summarised in paragraph 6.54 of the original report. It's considered that significant weight should be attached to the benefits of providing renewable energy, including reduction in carbon emissions. So the temporary nature attracts some weight, and weight also attached to the economic and social environmental benefits of the proposal. So therefore, on balance, it's concluded that the benefits of the proposal clearly outweigh the substantial harm to Greenbelt. And therefore, on this occasion, a departure from normal Greenbelt policies is justified. So, to summarise, the development is inappropriate in the Greenbelt, but the factors put forward amount to very special circumstances outweighing the harm of the proposal. There are no objections to the proposal on grounds of amenity, heritage, flood risk, or highways with appropriate conditions. And the recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons set out in paragraphs 7.1 to 7.3 of the original committee report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucy, and obviously thank you also for your time on the site visit and coming back to us with a lot of the questions that were raised. With that opens us up to questions. Are there any questions from the site visit and or anything else that's been raised? Steve Taylor, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lucy. Questions, I've got two. I know we discussed this last time, but with the photograph, the first photograph you showed, where you said the panels, and looking at them, they looked like they were horizontal. Is that the case in that artist's image? Because there's a fairly big difference between horizontal and vertical at 3 metres, which is getting on for 10 feet. It was the first one you showed where they'd like an artist's image type. That's, yeah, that was it, I think. No, that one that's it. So that looks to me as if they're horizontal, or you're not sure?
I mean, it is difficult to tell, Steve, but any kind of environmental impact assessment or landscape and visual impact assessment, everything that's put forward has to be a worst case scenario. So this should be showing, 3 metres.
So it should represent the panels being vertical?
Yes.
Chair, just to add to that point, so any application, any planning application which is accompanied by an environmental statement, so it's EIA development, the environmental impact assessment has to assess worst case, not just for landscape and visual, for highways, for ecology, for whatever chapters are scoped into the ES, has to assess worst case. That's called the Rochdale envelope. So the LVIA, the landscape and visual impact assessment accompanying this application, which forms part of the environment statement, is assessed on a worst case, in the same way that for another application, let's say the transport assessment would have to assume, if it was a commercial development, 24/7 operation, all the units being occupied. So it is a worst case scenario which is being assessed.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure that's what the picture looks like to me, but I get your point, and that's fine. The second one, and my recollection was this is going to be connected to the substation at Rayleigh, which is 8 miles away. And anybody who knows much about power, over 8 miles, the power drop you're going to get, i.e. the loss, is huge. So I was just trying to check if it really was going to Rayleigh. Do you know? Thanks.
Yeah, the proposal is definitely for it to go to Rayleigh. I know it's 12 kilometres, so I'm not sure if it's quite as much as 8 miles, the route. And, yeah.
No, that was just my question. I just wanted to be sure that I'd not got that round my neck. No, that's great. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for your help.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions at this stage? No? No further questions? Okay then. All right then. Let's move on. So we don't obviously have any further speaker statements on this, which would then take us straight into the debating phase. So I'll start with that. So looking at solar farms in Thurrock, certainly over the last 18 months, we've had a couple of solar farms come to us, the Baldwin Fens. We had a large application come to us in Ockenden, both of which were approval. I think Baldwin was quite close. I think there was a casting vote involved there. So we've certainly been encouraging these types of developments in Thurrock so far. Obviously looking at the national picture, we're in a real bad situation at the moment with our energy costs, our energy production, and that is obviously highlighted in the report. So whether we like these solar farms or not, it would appear that it's the sort of direction that the government wants us to go into. So in that sense, there is a lot to be positive about when looking at this solar farm. Looking at it from the other side of the fence, obviously going through the report, there doesn't appear to be too much community support here, which is interesting. I remember Ockenden was quite well supported by the local councillors, this one not so much. And there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of sort of funds for the community. And again, those previous applications did have something for the local communities. This one, not so much. So I can certainly see the positives and negatives on this one. Looking at members of the committee, I could easily see this could go either way. Have we got any thoughts and opinions? I'm quite happy to be led by yourselves on this one. Is it something we should be approving, or actually, is it something we should be rejecting? I'll go to yourself first, Paul, with your hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome everybody to the new year. It's a nice big one to start off with, really, but I will keep my comments quite short and sweet. We did have a site visit. It was very valuable, actually. I mean, it was a hugely beneficial thing to the whole kind of decision process. You know, you really get down deep into the site, you know, get to look back at the road, look at many, many different aspects. It was very, very beneficial. I'm going to go straight in, really. I mean, I'm not in favour of this application. I think what we're dealing with here is quite an ancient viewpoint of marshland, and I really do sincerely believe that this application will destroy that view. I know everyone says there's no right to a view, but I think in this case it's quite unique. The landscape, topography, I think that's the right word. I think we owe it to the residents of Thurrock actually to protect this viewpoint, and I don't think I think that the special circumstances are not great enough for me. I think solar farms can be put in many, many places, but I think this site is actually typically a view that needs to be preserved for generations to come. If the development proceeds, I think that'll be lost forever. So I won't be voting in favour of this.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Arnold. Looking at other members, were there any further comments? Councillor Polly, thank you. Oh.
Right, thank you, Chair. And I do agree with my colleague, Councillor Arnold, that I think it was imperative that we actually walked the site. And I do thank the officers, because it was a very muddy day, and we really did walk the site, and all the aspects from it. It's if there was anything else being proposed on this greenbelt land of this enormity, I don't think we'd even be entertaining it at all. I did find it overwhelming, the size of the plot and the potential to service the panels, the sort of set up yard at the top. I just don't know how you would ever recover that green belt land, although you say it's a temporary permission for 40 years and that it will go back into, I mean, we have two issues here as well. I think we've got agricultural land and green belt land. So, and I know it's the green belt that is the planning consideration rather than the agricultural use of the land, but I still do feel that how many acres? Is it 344?
I only know it in hectares,
Oh, right.
130. Around about 320, yeah, acres.
Sorry, that's my age, but yeah, I mean, 150 hectares doesn't sound quite as bad as 320 acres, which I just... and I do thank the officers, because having read the report, there was many questions on the night and there was many questions on the site visit, and you have captured all of our questions and responded to them quite well in the report. So I thank you for that. But I do agree with Councillor Arnold that the enormity of this particular solar farm, it gives me grave concern.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring in Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Well, you know where I'm going to go on this straight away, because what I'm here to do is defend the green belt in the first place. But knowing that area particularly well, since that's where my parents lived, I think visually it will look appalling. And I note in the report where the landscape character and assessment missed out mentioning the fact that it's, where is it here? The assessment has unfortunately not referred to this area being the largest remaining area of coastal marshland landscape within the borough. Now, when you think we've got a hell of a big waterfront, and it's all been used in industry, in the industrialisation of the whole area, and this is the only bit that's left. So now we're going to go and slap something else on it for at least 40 years. That's going to look an absolute mess. I'd feel sorry for the people who live opposite, and that view would be destroyed. And you say 40 years, I mean, if you think about it, for most of us, that's kind of our lifetime, the majority of our lifetime once we've stopped being kids. So it will never look the same again, certainly in most of our lifetimes. The whole site is, in my opinion, it boils down to something that I'd call perhaps lazy farming, where instead of actually farming the land, what you're doing is just taking the payment for the power that's generated and so on and so forth, and you don't actually have to do very much at all. So when you put that in light, and I take the point that was made that the government are kind of trying to go down this renewable site, well, that's very true. But at the same time, if you think about what's going on in Ukraine and the grain shortages that the world's experiencing at the moment, that's a hell of a big area of land to be using for arable or indeed for cattle. So, I'm not sure that anyone's balanced that bit of thinking in that, yeah, the government's got lots of ambitions, but surely we need to make sure we've got enough food for our own country and not be paying through the nose for it because the world market is limited. So, there's another sort of view of it there, if you like. And as I say, temporary for the next 40 years, I kind of struggle. I find, I know what you mean, but as far as I'm concerned, once the green belt's lost, it's lost. You never end up getting it back. And despite what's said, we all know full well, I think, in our own hearts, that what would happen at some time in the long distant future is all they'll want to do is do the repairs that are necessary and keep it running forevermore. So something like the groundworks that used to be done at Ockenden, the original applications for sort of 20 years, and they went on for about 70 years. I think it's a dreadful waste, and I'm dead opposed to it. But then I accept the fact that, of course, I would be. Anyway, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments there? No, okay. Well, look, thanks for those comments there. I think I agree with yourself, Councillor and Councillor Polly. Steve, look, it's a catch-22 with farming. Look, it should be noted that there are obviously huge benefits to this because as a country we don't produce enough energy. That's why our costs are spiralling out of control, and that's obviously then leading to higher food production. So I do think that's a balance there. I get what you're saying, that we need to produce our own food, but we also need to produce our own energy. So I think what's difficult for me on this one is that there are obviously huge benefits to be had as well. So, but I'll pick up on what's been said, and we do need to, we have approved one in Baldwin, we have approved one in Ockenden. These are going to start becoming more and more common, and I think ultimately that is the price we pay for these types of projects. Solar, wind, it is something we're going to have to get behind, and but also I take on board, what you're saying about the green belt. So with that, I don't think there are any further comments. There is obviously a recommendation for approval, which is obviously our opinion there. And I do think, obviously, Lucy, again, I think it is a really well put together report, and you spent a lot of time on this one. Let's just find out. Page 86, recommendation 8.1 for approval. Is there anyone of the four members who's looking to recommend that? So bringing you in there, Lee, you'll be looking for an alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, referring members to the Council's Constitution, Chapter 5, Part 3 sets out at 7.2 that if Planning Committee seeks to make a decision contrary to the Planning Officer recommendation, the following will apply. The first is that the mover of the motion should clearly specify right down the motion, including the reasons for departing from the Officer's recommendation, and that needs to be seconded. The planning officer and legal officer should be given the opportunity to consider the implications before any vote is taken. If the arguments against the officer's recommendation is very clear, substantiated, not tentative, then a decision can be made this evening, Chair. So really what we're looking for is clear reasons weighted in policy as to set out why the application should be refused.
Okay, thanks for that, Lee. Did anyone want to recommend an alternative to this application? No. Councillor Polly. Okay, thank you.
So, Chair, I would move on recommendation for refusal. I don't know if that's seconded.
Okay, thank you. I saw your hand raised there. That's seconded by Councillor Arnold. So what we'll do now, obviously, is on page 74, we've got our weightings. Obviously, on the left-hand side, we've got inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which is obviously substantial. On the right-hand side is obviously the arguments being put forward by the applicant, which have obviously been weighed up by our officers. So at this stage now, what we're going to have to do is obviously promote our reasons as to why this should not go ahead. And also, we're going to have to counteract some of these arguments that have been put forward. Lee, is there anything to add to what I've just said there? Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. I think you've captured that. So on a Greenbelt grounds is set out on that table there, and absolutely the weightings that have been attributed by officers is set out in that table, and that weighs the applicant's very special circumstances case. And clearly, if you considered that the weighting should be different, lesser weight, for instance, and that wouldn't tip the scales in favour of the application, then this is the place to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone want to start in terms of the weighting this evening, attacking these? Or would you, Paul, did you want to come in there on anything? And then,
Yeah, well, I think, obviously the inappropriate development harm to the Greenbelt, I think that is still significant. Substantial, sorry. So I just need a little bit of time to have a little look at this. I'll just pause on it on a second, please.
okay, Councillor Potter, did you want to come in anything, or should I start?
If you carry on, Chair, and then I'll come in after.
Okay, thank you, Lee, and thank you, Georgette. All right then, so Lee, obviously looking at the applicant's arguments here, going through the first, some of the things that stand out for me is this idea of energy security. So whilst we've put substantial weight to that, I think it should be acknowledged that solar farms are not the only resource available to us to start becoming a more energy efficient country. There are other clean resources that we could be using. If you look at other European countries such as France, they seem to be a lot better than us at their own energy production. Nuclear, I know it's you know, controversial, but the European Union has come out and said, you know, in this day and age, this is now a, you know, a clean way to you know, produce energy, and that's another direction that this country is going in, albeit not as good as you know, some of our European colleagues. So whilst we've got substantial weight added to that, I think that, you know, you could probably drop that down to moderate on the basis of, you know, if energy security is so important, you know, it's not just a case of you know, wind farms and solar farms. You know, we do have other options. I'll give you another incredibly unpopular option. It's coal-fired power stations. Now, if you fired them up, that would be against government policy. What government are also saying, we're in an energy crisis, so which one is it? You know, this stuff is either important or it's not. Looking at other, you know, looking at item 6, we've obviously gone into significant weight as well, and again, that leads back to what we've said, that whilst, you know, what the argument there is that the alternatives are bad. Well, not necessarily. It depends on how much weight you want to put behind energy security. So in that sense, I think you could probably add moderate weight. And then I will go on to obviously the biodiversity net gain. I think obviously what we need to be aware of, that this is going in on top of farmland. So whilst obviously I accept there is a gain there, we're also losing you know, productive farmland. And obviously from that you could probably drop that down to moderate. And for me, when you start taking those away, you then start looking at this substantial reason for Greenbelt as probably enough to stand up on appeal if it was to head in that direction. With that, I'll come back to yourself, Paul. Have you had time to look at any of these other reasons as to
No, I'm fine with that for the moment, thank you.
Yep, okay. Councillor Polly, thank you.
Yes, just coming back with the alternatives as well. I mean, there are biofuels, there are organic crops that can be built, can be grown, that can help with green fuels. I've also, the green infrastructure, as we've alluded to, there is an erosion to our green belt along the coastal 17 miles of river Thurrock has from tip to end, and I do agree that this is a significant part of our green infrastructure, so I don't agree with the weighting on that. Farm diversification, there was a suggestion in a report that we would look to be putting sheep underneath the solar panels, and I'm yet to find a farm in England that can or has been successfully able to put livestock on a solar farm such as this, due to breed of sheep and licenses and the animal welfare. Very complicated. So I don't agree with that point, but and I'll return to it again. My main concern is the considerable damage to the green belt that a solar farm of this enormity imposes on this borough. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Taylor, you had your hand raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if it will help or not, but when you sort of look at 7, which is temporary and reversible impacts, well, that sort of is what, in common terms, we'd say perhaps is jammed tomorrow. But would a reasonable person consider that 40 years is temporary? I'll leave that as a question, but it sort of challenges why there's some weight there in my mind. Alternatives, is that meaning alternative energy or question mark? On page 75, Lucy.
It's alternative sites, Steve. Alternative sites.
Okay, so if it's alternative sites, we seem to have found plenty in Thurrock in the past, Do we really have to keep going that hard at it? And my last one is about this transmission versus distribution connection. And I'm not clear that I understand what that means either. Because my point earlier about an 8-mile, the power loss drop on an 8-mile cable or 12-kilometre cable is pretty vast. So I'm not sure there's any efficiency in it. And the only way you get around it is put a bigger cable in. And so I don't know if any of those points might be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. If you could come in there and clarify any of that.
Chair, I've picked up, and I don't want to tread on Lucy's toes because she's the case officer, but I'm familiar with the report. I've picked up on a few things, and I'm not, you take your decision, you're the decision maker, but, you know, I'd want to keep you as fully informed as you can be in making that decision. So on the transmission thing, yes, power is lost over distance. The applicant still thinks it's viable. And, you know, the market will decide because it is an energy market. So if the applicant still thinks it's viable, then they still think it's viable.
Sorry, what I was challenging really was, I guessed I knew what the meaning was, but I wasn't sure. But I don't understand why there's moderate weight behind that. It's a bit of a, it's still going to be a power loss, so I don't see that as a positive, to be truthful.
It is, but because of the amount of energy being created, because it's up to 49.9 megawatts, then it's going to connect to national grid as opposed to local distribution networks. And the substation is at, I can't remember, Rayleigh, is it?
It's the junction of the 130 and the 127.
So that's the nearest available one, and the applicant hasn't got a lot of options. I mean, for example, the Balvin solar farm connects to the Worley substation, which is actually in Havering, which is 6-7 kilometres away off the top of my head. I mean, it's just, that's where they need to connect because of the electrical output.
That's about 3 miles.
I work in K, I'm afraid. Just quickly, because I don't want to go over things too long. I mean, some comments were made about community funds. That's covered off in community benefits funds, as it's sometimes called. That's covered off on page 33 of the report. In terms of views and impact, it is part of the environmental statement, landscape and visual impact. So we have a consultation response from our landscape and ecology consultant who specialises in landscape and visual impact, and his views are set out in the report. I mean, it would be churlish of me to say there would be no impact, because guess what? Every application you deal with and every application we deal with, from a rear extension to a solar farm, has an impact. And it's about weighing the impact and balancing it all out and reaching a thorough and properly balanced and robust decision. So there is an impact, but it is covered in the report. And the advice from our consultant is no objection, ultimately no objection, subject to conditions. So picking up on that point about the size, because a couple of members mentioned the size of the development. Yes, it's a big development. Not going to hide that, it's a big development, but what we're looking at is impact, rather than just, the fact that a development is of a certain size doesn't necessarily equate to harm in any way. It's about the nature of the impact. And obviously, bigger sized developments have perhaps a propensity to have potentially more harm, but it's still drilling down to what is the harm, rather than just saying it's a big site, it must therefore be harmful. It's about identifying the harm. And you've mentioned a few things already. Greenbelt has clearly been mentioned already. The agricultural land thing, it's 3B. So it's not best and most versatile. So the government says grades 1, 2 and 3A, the best and most versatile, they should be retained. This isn't. So that wouldn't stand up, in my view, as an objection. Loss of agricultural land, potential loss of arable or grazing land, probably wouldn't stand up. I've mentioned the thing about you know, the visual impact, and it's difficult because you'll be familiar with how the green belt works, and the green belt is about openness. So there is some diffusion between green belt impact and landscape and visual impact, but just on landscape and visual on its own, subject to mitigation, our consultant's view is it's not harmful, or not harmful enough to justify refusing. You were getting into the table, and in terms of greenbelt harm, which is on the left-hand side of that table at paragraph 6.54 or page 74 of the agenda, in terms of the weight we have to put to greenbelt harm, it is substantial because that's what national policy says. So you haven't really got a lot of latitude to vary from that. The factors on the other side of the table, yes, you can interpret them as you wish because you're the decision makers. What we've, and I've said before at other committees, what we tend to do within that part of the report is look at what has been used elsewhere in the borough and what's been used elsewhere in comparable appeal decisions. And anecdotally, there have been a lot of appeal decisions recently for solar farms, and a number of those will be in the green belt. It's each on merits, so you make your own mind up, but the weighting we've put on tries to reflect the general trend. So that's, yeah, we're not just magicking stuff up. We're trying to reflect what the general trend is. I'm not going to say a lot. And again, just anecdotally, because I drive past a solar farm in Havering on the way in, just anecdotally, I have seen sheep, just on the one occasion. Now, whether or not that means it happens, they truck them in, literally, and they let them go for a day, and then they take them off. So it's a possibility. All I'm going to say, you're the decision makers, you're perfectly entitled to take the decision. My strong advice is, if you're looking to vary from the recommendation, it should be green belt.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I think from my perspective, obviously, we're homing in on the substantial weighting behind Greenbelt. Obviously, it is important for us also to go into these weightings that have been weighed up on the right-hand side, and I think obviously that's where our additional comments come from. But I get what you're saying, Matthew. I know, you know, we should be aware that by rejecting this, you know, it may go through an appeal process, it may be reworked, who knows, and at that time we'll have to see what the outcome is. But thanks for the comments, and I don't disagree with the report either. In a sense, we sometimes as councillors we do have the ability to look at these things differently to officers, and sometimes there are constraints there. So yeah, I've got you loud and clear. Is there anything else to add before we sum up? Lee, I know obviously you was looking at your weightings there. Councillor Polly raised farm diversification, Steve Taylor raised transmission first distribution. Obviously those weights, you know, I think we can put from moderate down to some on both of those. And obviously I did home in earlier on increasing renewable energy regeneration under energy security as well, where we said, you know, there are other options available, you know, such as wind farms, etc. So again, I think we could probably drop that down to probably something more moderate in that sense. You all right?
Yeah, I just had one question.
Certainly, yeah, no, ask away, thank you.
Matt, the Balvin and the other sites, I can't remember what sort of size, because you're saying that the fact, I'm not just saying because this is just a big site, I'm just saying that impact is different. But the size of the Balvin solar farm, can we remember roughly?
The output was the same, so it was 49.9.
That's another consideration, I think, because of the size of this, you would think there's going to be more solar panels on there. This is a lay person. I mean, we as members are not planning officers, and nor should we be. We are here to bring some checks and balances to this as well. If you've got a site that's, say, 100 hectares, Lucy, rather than 150 hectares, but they're both outputting 40.9.9, what is the justification for this site to be 150 acres how is that hectares when the output, the energy it's producing is no more than something that's perhaps 2/3 its size?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Polly. With the Balvin Fen, I can't remember exactly, but it was a very similar hectarage, if that's a word, to this proposal at Fobbing Marshes. But the Meadbridge scheme, so the South Ockenden scheme, is smaller, so about, I think off the top of my head, about 90 hectares. But this scheme, so the Fobbing Marshes scheme, which is on the table now, that includes a lot of set-aside land, so a lot of land which is mitigation for ecological, basically the biodiversity net gain. So a lot of this site, a lot of the red line 134 hectare site is utilised to, I suppose, to put forward a acceptable proposal benefit-wise. Is that?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think if everyone's made their comments, Lee, I'll just bring you in there and we'll just go to some form of vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So a greenbelt reason for refusal, just looking through the agenda, page 133, there's a recommendation number 1. That would give members a fair idea about what the wording might be, but as with all cases, we would need to agree the wording with yourself, Chair, the detailed wording specific to this application. But as I say, just as a feel for what that would be. We've taken note of the weightings. Committees have a clear view that the balance isn't tipped in favour of approval in this instance, and that the impact of the greenbelt is not clearly outweighed by those factors. Chair, with this, I would just like to bring the legal officer in, just to make sure that she's happy with that, and then otherwise move on to the vote. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy with the way we're proceeding and the process, because you've mentioned about the we're going involved with the Constitution, and yeah, it's fairly clear the steps taken.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Okay then, Councillor Arnold, obviously you put forward that recommendation for refusal there. Obviously, I imagine based on the conversation that we want to keep that down to the greenbelt reason for refusal, yeah? So on that basis, your recommendation, seconded by Councillor Polly, would be the proposed development would represent inappropriate development in the greenbelt and have an unacceptable effect on the openness of the greenbelt. And the purposes of including land within the greenbelt, words to be confirmed with myself, but with officers. Lee, you happy we move to the vote there? Yeah, okay. So all members who are able to vote on this particular item, the recommendation to refuse from Councillor Arnold, seconded by Councillor Polly. Oh, did you propose it, did you? Sorry. All right. Sorry, Councillor Polly. Let's do that. Councillor Polly, over to Councillor Arnold. All those in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. Okay. And Matthew, that's unanimous, as all 4 voting members have voted against, yeah? Excellent. All right then. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for your time on that particular item. So that's agenda item 8, land south of Marsh Farm has been refused. Okay, so with that, we're now moving on to item 9 on the agenda. That will bring all members on the committee here this evening into play. That's 22/01714/FUL, Whitwell Court, Fairview Chase, Stamford Hope, and that's found on pages 95 to 114. Okay, so we'll go on to that. And Nadia, if you'd be so kind as to present your report, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Good evening, all. I'll just wait for everything to settle down, if I may. It would help if I moved it as well as turned it on. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So this application has been called in by councillors to consider the potential loss of amenity for neighbours and the possible overdevelopment of the site. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a detached two-storey block providing 6 one-bed flats. The site, Whitwell Court, is located to the southeastern side of Fairview Chase in Stamford. The site comprises a roughly L-shaped two-storey block of flats, providing an existing 10 one-bed flats and parking as well as access arrangements. A previous planning application was approved in December 2017 for the exact same proposed development before you this evening. This previous approval expired at the end of 2020, I imagine in part having not been implemented due to the pandemic that we were experiencing at the time. The site is bordered by residential properties and development to the north, northwest and northeast, and by the Grove House Wood to the immediate south. To the north of Fairview Chase and opposite the site lies the recently completed flatted development Fairview Court, which in the aerial image isn't shown as being completed, but you'll see in the photographs coming up that it has been. This is a plan of the existing elevations and floor plans showing the L-shaped building. And this plan shows the proposed elevations of the building. As you can see, it's the darker coloured block there. The flat block would be of the same height as the existing closest block and measure 8.1 metres in height, so the same as the adjacent block, and 16.3 metres in width, reflecting the same mass, proportions and scale of the longest part of the adjacent building on the site. The scale, mass, siting, materials and appearance of the proposal would be considered appropriate for their location, would not be considered an overdevelopment of the site and would comply with all relevant core strategy policies. The site currently officially provides 10 car parking spaces for the 10 flats, and the proposal looks to reconfigure the car parking arrangements in order to provide 16 parking spaces, equating to 1 parking space per flat. While this provision sits at the slightly lower end of the 15 to 22 parking spaces ratio which would be expected for new development, and it would provide 16 spaces, a material consideration is the previous approved scheme for an identical 6 one-bed flats at the site. Given the proposal seeks to provide 16 parking spaces for the 16 flats, the level of parking provision is considered acceptable. And furthermore, there are no highway objections to the proposed access arrangements subject to conditions. This is a plan showing the track changes and where the electric vehicle charging points would be located in the rearranged parking layout, and another reminder of the extent of the application site. Here are some images of the site and the immediate context. So this view is looking down Fairview Chase with the application site in the distance there, and the recently completed development of Fairview Court can be seen on the right. And this is the view looking up Fairview Chase with the site on the right along with Grove House Wood and Fairview Court on the left, and just beyond it is St Margaret's Path just beyond, which some of you may be familiar with. Another view looking up Fairview Chase with the entrance to the wood that lies to the immediate south of the site. And here are several images of the existing flat blocks at Whitwell Court. And some views from within Whitwell Court. As you can see, parts of the site have been subject to fly tipping, and this part of the site is currently fenced off. And this is the view looking to the immediate northeast from within Whitwell Court. The proposal would be considered to be of an appropriate and acceptable siting and scale within Whitwell Court and provide an adequate level of both internal and external amenity space for the occupiers. The proposal would not be considered to appear cramped or overdeveloped and would not result in any unacceptable overlooking or loss of privacy and amenity for neighbours. As the proposal is effectively a renewal of the previous planning permission, the application is recommended for approval to members subject to conditions on page 107. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that detailed report, Nadia. That then opens us to questions. Are there any questions from members on this application? No. So just one from me then quickly, Nadia. So it's well within well, it's not well within, but it meets those parking standards. The surrounding area, is there on-street parking? And I imagine all these spaces, are they for individual apartments, or is it shared parking? Thank you.
The parking arrangements, firstly, in terms of the parking provision, it would be one parking space per unit, and we have tight conditions requiring that layout and the access arrangements to be conditioned and agreed with us first. And whilst there is some on-street parking, if I'm able to go back to the photos, you can see there is some on-street parking at the moment, but bearing in mind some of the existing parking that would be available is currently fenced off. It makes it quite difficult at the moment. This would actually improve the situation. And furthermore, the actual parking, the parking provided by Fairview Court opposite the site more than complies with our standards. So there are existing restrictions on the left-hand side, on the west side of, on the northwest side of Fairview Chase, but the development of Fairview Court provides parking for its own occupants sufficient and complying with our standards, as was this proposal. So it's not considered this would worsen the situation that exists on street at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Polly.
Thank you very much. On the scheme, I noticed that the parking provision, we've got two parking spaces that are allocated for electric vehicles and one parking space that can be dual. Does that mean that either or it has to be a hybrid, or I mean, I just don't know how you would monitor that, Nadia.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, there are two parking spaces that have been put forward solely for the use and occupation of electric vehicles, thinking of future use and need. One is dual in that the infrastructure is going to be provided so that it could be used for either non-electric vehicles or electric vehicles in the future. That's what's suggested in the scheme.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just add to that. Our current parking standards for flats is 2%, so obviously that's slightly more than the requirement, but ultimately that's the way we're going, and our standards also say that all parking spaces will be passively provided for future electrification or use by electric vehicles. So any new development, when it's built, it will have a percentage of electric vehicle parking spaces, and it will have, the remainder will be set such that in the future all those could be, so it will have ducting and whatever is put in so that electric vehicle pods can be put in without significant impact on the car park itself.
Lovely, and I welcome that. That's forward thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions there? No? Okay. We have no speakers on this particular item. Would anyone like to debate or comment on this application before we head to the vote? No hands are raised there. Okay. All right then, so with that, obviously very detailed report. Thank you, Nadia, for your work on that one. On page 107, there is a recommendation, which is recommendation 8.0. That is to approve, subject to the following conditions. I'd like to recommend that. Is that seconded? Seconded. Seconded by Councillor Polly. Okay, are you happy we go to the vote there, Matthew? Excellent. Okay, so all those in favour of agenda item 9, Whitwell Court, please raise your hands. Excellent, okay, and that's unanimous across the committee. Thank you. So with that, we can say that Whitwell Court agenda item 9 has been approved. Thank you everyone for your contributions there. We know obviously item agenda 10 has been removed. That's Sounddown Nurseries for a later date. That then takes us on to 32 Rainbow Lane, Stamfordley Hope. John, I understand that you'll be taking this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, evening members. This application seeks planning permission for the subdivision of plot of number 32 Rainbow Lane to allow provision of a new dwelling on the resultant plot. The new dwelling would face east onto the junction of Billet Lane and Rainbow Lane. So that's the site, an aerial photo of the existing plot. So it's the corner garden or the side garden of number 32. So that's the proposed site plan. So you've got number 32 there. That's the current side garden. So the new dwelling would be a sort of L-shaped property with 2 parking spaces adjoining the boundary of number 66 Billet Lane. That's another picture of the site plan. And then we've got, that's the proposed elevations of the property. So that's the front elevation that faces onto the junction. So the site is in a residentially allocated area. These are some of the site photos. So that's number 32, looking out over the open billet field. That's looking towards the site from the east, so property would be right in the middle of the plot. And that's looking to the west along Billet Lane. And that's another street scene. So if we head back to the site plan, so the site is within a residentially allocated area, so the principle of the development would be acceptable, but the proposal does need to comply with other policies in the core strategy. So as you've seen from the photos, the existing side garden provides a pleasant open corner to this junction. The dwellings on Rainbow Road, as you've seen, are organised in uniform lines and a regular pattern. And the proposed dwelling, as you can see from the plan on the screen, would be set completely different orientation to those properties and would disrupt the character of both street scenes. So it would erode the character and appearance of this corner, and we consider this to be harmful to the character and appearance of the area and objectionable in design and layout terms. In terms of the appearance of the property, it's been designed, it appears to be designed sort of from the inside out, so the window pattern isn't particularly well designed. You can see on the rear elevation, they've had to design it to avoid overlooking, so the windows aren't organised in a particularly pleasant way. There's a combination of roof forms and heights. So overall, the actual design of the building is considered to be unacceptable and out of character with the design of the nearby properties. So that's a recommended reason for refusal. We've also got highways concerns about the 2 parking spaces, their proximity to the corner junction, and there's a lack of information about site displays and potential access, so that is also a concern. And the proposal would also result in number 32 being left with a very small garden, so there's concerns about the impact on the living standards of that occupier. So overall, those factors combined together suggest that the scheme's overdevelopment of the plot and out of character with the area. So we're recommending refusal for the 4 reasons set out on pages 145 to 146. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for that detailed report. That then opens us to questions. Do any members have any questions for Jonathan? Councillor Polly?
Thank you, Jonathan. Just noted that this is another call-in from members. Was there any dialogue with officers from the members, or the reason why they called it in, other than what's stated in the report?
No, the reasons were those set out on the report. It was a sort of short call-in, which, yeah, was concerns about the residents and the density of the area. So, yeah, that's what it was, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions there? No? Okay, so we then, as there's no speakers on this particular item, we can then move over to debate. Would anyone like to comment on this before we head to the vote? Councillor Arnold? And Steve, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I know the site quite well, and I actually completely agree with the officer's recommendation. It's, this development will be wholly inappropriate on this site. Unfortunately, it's just a clear demonstration of how a developer will really try and squeeze one in, really, should I say. Not without any real kind of due regard to the residents or the neighbouring properties. It would be completely out of sorts there. And so I would actually vote in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Interestingly, unlike Councillor Arnold, I don't know the site, so I made a point earlier this week of driving down there to kind of visually see what it looks like, and I completely agree with the officer's assessment. The first thing that crossed my mind is where the parking spaces are. You're right on a bend. It's kind of daft, and then what was going to be left of the number 32 is a sort of postage stamp of a garden or worse. So I completely agree with your assessment, and I have to say, I kind of looked at it and thought, how are you going to get that on there? I think it would look awful, and I think it's, as you rightly say, an overdevelopment of the site, and it sort of stands out a mile as that. So it was my only comment. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maney.
I noticed in the report that it said about the reversing in, that you could only get in and out from reversing in and out. Where is the front of the property? Is the front of the property on the corner?
Yeah, the front, so that's the front of the property there. So that's Rainbow Lane, sorry, and you've got the fields opposite. So the spaces are there, so you'd either have to forward in and back, and you'd potentially have cars coming around the corner, or you'd have to back in, and that would be a concern in terms of the manoeuvring as well. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Okay. All right then. So we can head to debate. Were there any final debating items before we head to the vote? No further comments. Okay then. So recommendation on page 137. That's a recommendation. Oh no, hang on. Sorry. Lost it there. Recommendation on 145. Is to refuse. I'll recommend that. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Polly. Okay. Matthew, happy for us to move to the vote? Yeah. Okay. So all those in favour of refusal, please raise your hands. Okay. It's unanimous across the committee there. So we can say agenda item 11 has been refused. So thank you everyone for your contributions there. And this then takes us on to the last item on the agenda. That's agenda item 12. And obviously this is a pink paper. So at this stage, obviously, we go to a closed meeting. We have no members of the public here with us. And Matthew, I understand the stream that would...